Mr. Farrugia, you led the Malta Employers Association for 23 years, and you've seen Malta's economy change for the better, for the worse.
These past 23 years, as I would imagine with all periods, have been characterized by a series of crises, but crises which have transformed our country as well. For example, in around 2005, we had the crisis in manufacturing, when a substantial part of our manufacturing base was being outsourced and shifted to cheaper destinations, as was happening all over Europe. And this, of course, necessitated an economic transformation to try to look for different economic sectors, hence aviation, financial services, and this is a testament to the resilience of our economy, in the sense that if one looks at post-independence history, one finds these constant developments, which result today in having quite a diversified and robust economy.
What state is the Maltese economy right now? What shape is it in?
I think although the general macroeconomic indicators are positive in the sense that we have low unemployment, inflation is an issue, but it is more or less under control, and there is nothing really worrying about these general macroeconomic indicators. However, there are issues. First of all, with sustainability. How long can we sustain these trends? Are we attracting new sectors? I think there is a sense of stagnation on that front. To what extent can Malta remain competitive? How is economic sustainability being synchronized with the well-being of the general population? Because after all, the whole scope of having a better economy is for people to have a better life, a better quality of life.
Do you agree with the finance minister that Malta has to change from being labor intensive, and I quote here, to something that is more capital intensive, something that produces more value added? I mean, in a few words, is the time ripe for a new economic model?
I agree 100%. The problem is that it is long overdue. MEA has been stating has been expressing the need for the economy to transform itself in this direction. We're seeing worrying trends whereby the growth of our economy was becoming dependent on the influx of foreign workers and more people living on the island. So this has increased our dependency on construction and related services for economic growth, and at the same time there was no concurrent strategy to support this increase in population.
Yes, but you're making this argument about overpopulation. If I remember, yes, even in 2017, during that phase, no?
Yes.
You had been vociferous as MEA about the need for government to address the bureaucracy when it comes to employers employing third country nationals.
Yes.
Don't you think that your argument doesn't go hand in hand with what you're saying?
It's not contradictory, because on one hand, we were saying that the bureaucracy to employ third country nationals should be reduced, so there should be an easier process. But that doesn't mean that we should open our doors for anyone who wants to come to work here, or that we should design the economy in a manner that will depend on the influx of foreign employees. So what is contradictory really is trying to control supply by having an overly bureaucratic process in tandem with a growing demand for foreign workers. Mm-hmm. And that's why a balance needs to be sought. And this, of course, is transforming the entire demographic structure of our country. If one looks at the number of live births on the island, one finds that today, out of 4,000 births, Okay, close to 25% of birds are not birds from Maltese families. A significant chunk of the number of birds that we have in Malta are non-Maltese.
Okay, but you are in agreement with the finance minister who's advocating for a new economic model. We've heard this before, but nothing seems to be done.
Yes.
I mean, let's face it, are employers ready for the change?
Change can be painful, but employers play the tune of government strategy. So government's role is not to run the economy itself, but to design a strategy, to have a vision.
In your opinion, what is holding government from implementing a different strategy, implementing a new economic model?
I think government has played safe. It has been so far a simple, unstated strategy, because we never came across an electoral pledge or an economic plan which stated that we shall pump prime the economy through excessive construction, and through it we will attract more foreigners living on the island, and consequently this will generate aggregate demand and the economy will expand. I mean, there was never an expression to that extent. But on the other hand, employers were noticing the sign of the times. So rather than shifting their investments to new economic sectors, many investors played safe and say, well, if there is a guaranteed return from building blocks of flats, so be it. If there is an increased return from building more hotels, for example, in the tourism industry, so be it. But this incongruence between the enterprise's vision and the national vision now is becoming more pronounced. And this is why planning and vision is essential. And these are things which have been raised numerous times at the Malta Council for Economic and Social Development.
Yeah, what is the mood like at the MCSD table?
I would say that Malta has a very solid structure for social dialogue, and the MCSD, since it was founded, has functioned reasonably well. And although there have been numerous suggestions and debates in the past, but not all the proposals have been taken up. And this creates a sense of frustration at times, because there could be burning issues. I will mention one. Like what? When the government was thinking of legalizing marijuana and softening the laws of marijuana, there was consensus that yes, we agreed that if you have something like that on your criminal record, it could be removed. There shouldn't be draconian measures on whoever is caught smoking and so on. However, there was also a general consensus around the table that the law, as it was being proposed, was wrong. And we strongly advised government not to proceed and to tweak the law so that it will not open the doors for further problems, social problems, and abuse. But we know what the results are there for everyone to see today. So in Malta, we have a drug problem, and legalizing marijuana has led or is leading to the normalization of cocaine.
How can you prove that?
You can observe it. You can observe it, for example, even in the places of work. We're getting many members calling us about drug-related issues.
Back to construction. Do you believe that construction plays such a major role in the economy as some have been arguing during the past decade?
I mean, construction is and will remain an important sector of the economy. However, I think the main issue is the fact that land is scarce and getting scarcer. That's number one. Secondly, in the 70s and 80s and 90s, most construction activity was geared towards providing people with homes. Today, it is not the case. Mm-hmm. So we are not building homes. We are building blocks of flats for various purposes, amongst them speculative. The issue is that we have a lot of building stock which is not really required. And that is dangerous because eventually it could lead to a fall in property prices. And the main victims of property prices would be those families who have mortgages on property which they purchased at a relatively high price, and the value of the equity of that property will be reduced, and they would still have to pay the loan.
Okay, have we become too dependent on construction then?
Currently, yes. Currently, I think it's reaching a not a crisis level, but certainly there is too much emphasis on construction and concurrently population growth to fill up the buildings that we are building. I think that is where our economic model needs a critical transformation, a critical reform.
On inflation, last year, just before the budget, government introduced the Stabilità scheme. Mm-hmm. Has it had the impact that the government wished for, you think?
I very much doubt it. And I am also critical of the way in which it was introduced, because I think the major stakeholders, I think it would have been better had the government approached the social partners and we would have made our own suggestions, especially those that are specialized in that area. MBA is specialized in employment, not in retail really. But I am sure that there would have been better results. So if inflation is on the decline, it is on the decline because even internationally.
That's the other side of the coin now. What impact did the increase in COLA have on employers?
I mean, Malta is one of the very few economies that have such a mechanism, which means that wages automatically increase according to the rate of inflation. And to have an inflation which results in an increase in wages at minimum of 13 euros per week is quite high, and generates further inflation in itself.
And you have been asking for this to change.
Pardon?
You have been asking for this to change,
well,
for a reform in COLA.
Ideally, in principle, wages should be a measure of productivity. Therefore, at national level, we can only increase wages if we are more productive. And if we keep on depending on low value-added sectors, then we cannot expect wages to rise.
You mentioned productivity. Now, the Corporate Times last Sunday reported an increase of 26.9% in public sector employment over the past 11 years. Are you concerned?
Very much so.
Public sector employees in proportion to the full-time workforce decreased really during the past decade.
Not necessarily.
From 26.4% to 18.3%. I mean, there are now, in 2013, there used to be 42,000 roughly out of 160,000, 42,000 public sector employees. Nowadays, there are 52,000 out of 283,000.
Yes. But I'm saying not necessarily. First of all, there are thousands of outsourced employees. Mm-hmm. So what is happening is that although the labor force is expanding, but at the same time, the expansion is mostly due to foreign employees, which means that the percentage of Maltese workers in the public sector has increased. And that is what we should look at, because that has generated a shortage of Maltese employees, and I'll be very clear here. The majority of Maltese employers prefer to employ Maltese employees. However, the shortage of labor is there, and the government is absorbing more Maltese employees. I think there is a real need to rationalize the Maltese labor force. And by rationalizing, I mean that where necessary, we also need to have job destruction.
Job destruction?
Yes, job destruction.
What's that?
Job destruction means that you create new jobs with higher value added at the expense of saying, listen, Some jobs we don't need anymore. And people have to move from these areas to new emerging sectors of the economy. Now, this rationalization could, and is taking part to a certain extent in the private sector. For example, take the banks. We don't see as many cashiers at the banks as we used to. Why? Because the process is being automated. Supermarkets, we have the automated, the self checkout. Mm-hmm. So that will reduce the demand for cashiers at the supermarket. This is the way we need to go. This is the way we need to go. Because it's not just our land which is limited, but even our human resource. In the public sector, it's even worse. So we know jobs for votes, phantom jobs, general inefficiencies.
What do you make of the argument on cushy jobs that was made by the Prime Minister a few weeks ago?
It depends what he meant by cushy jobs. Because if he meant by cushy jobs, but that a number of civil servants did not play the tune of the OPM diktat, I mean, well, okay, you have a cushy job. If by cushy job we mean that you have that you're being paid for a 40-hour week, but you're only delivering 12, either because there is no work or because you are simply inefficient, that is another story. Probably the reality is a mixture of both.
The European Commission has called on government to stop subsidizing energy tariffs.
When there was the COVID, therefore government managed to cushion the impact of this crisis and hence keep people in employment, which is what we did. And one of the measures was to subsidize energy, even in view of the fact that energy prices spiraled upwards. Now we are at a stage where energy prices are down. The European Union is saying, well, stop the subsidies. I wouldn't go as far to say or to commit myself as a government to say, well, they are here to stay. If we want to have a sustainable fiscal situation, one cannot really make such commitments. And unfortunately, the political situation, you have situations whereby, because of the political situation, both parties would agree on certain measures, not because they are good in themselves, but because they stand to lose support if they take a particular position, which might be the position which is required.
If the subsidies are there to stay from government and the opposition standpoints, what other measures can they take in order to reduce the deficit?
From the aspect of energy, more investment in alternative sources. I don't think we have as yet exploited our potential for photovoltaic energy.
What we've been discussing for the past half an hour, frankly, it all boils down to the good governance of the country. What's your take on that?
I think that is where we have the biggest deficit. We do have a very serious and worsening governance deficit. The fact that you open the papers and you come across a new scandal every day is simply not sustainable. It is damaging our reputation as an investment destination, and Malta does have quite a bit to offer, but sadly, our reputation is getting worse by the minute. The Vital Steward scandal, imagine, because I myself couldn't believe it in the beginning, but 400 million of public funds which have just disappeared. I mean, think about it. It's not just a matter of corruption. Even if there wasn't any corruption, let us assume that everybody is squeaky clean, There was no corruption involved. But there was gross incompetence, Gross incompetence over a number of years, which of course leads one to suspect what was behind it. But that is clearly a case in point. And others, the social benefits scandal, what message does that give to the working population? I mean, you wake up every morning and go to work. And in the private sector, unless you give a productive day, you might lose your job. You have to give a productive day, and there has to be a demand for the services that you offer in order for the company to stay afloat. Okay, because you can become redundant as well. Okay, but on the other hand, you hear about many individuals who are enjoying life because they are getting these funds from the Social Security Department, okay, without working. What message, how does that affect the work ethic? How does that affect the values of our young generation? Because it is no wonder that we have a young generation which is being disenchanted, indifferent, and as we hear, many are seeking to work, to seek a better life abroad, even because of the deteriorating natural environment. So what can we do to send a message, even to our young people? Listen, this country is yours. Don't give it up. There's a lot to do here. You can have a good quality of life here. Okay, you can succeed on merit. Do we really have that situation in Malta? Can we honestly say that people succeed on merit? Why has the MEA been asking for parliamentary reform, to have full-time parliamentarians, to have well-paid ministers? What situations are you expecting if you're paying a minister 60,000 a year? So these are the real issues which, unfortunately, because of our political divide, are not being addressed sufficiently.
Mr. Farrugia, thank you.